State of Cannabis.
This is the State of Cannabis News Digest, a roundup of this week's key developments in the cannabis industry.
It's Saturday morning at 9, and this is your weekly cannabis policy briefing. This week, the national debate begins in Washington, where federal officials are making the case for moving marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. That decision could affect medical access, federal regulation, and the tax burden on state-licensed cannabis businesses. From there, we turn to Pennsylvania, where lawmakers are trying to force action on adult use legalization, and to Idaho and Nebraska, where medical cannabis remains a work in progress, one through the ballot process, the other through new state rules and continuing legal uncertainty. Business access is also at the center of the week's news. Delaware has overridden a governor's veto to limit county zoning barriers for marijuana businesses. Missouri is preparing another round of cannabis microbusiness licenses. Rhode Island is trying to restart a retail licensing process delayed by litigation. And New York is testing a new showcase model that brings cannabis farmers closer to consumers. Then, the hemp market comes under scrutiny. Delaware is weighing a regulated system for THC-infused beverages. Hawaii is enforcing new hemp and CBD retail restrictions. North Carolina is moving towards strict total THC limits. And South Carolina has failed, for now, to settle its own debate over hemp drinks and edibles. We'll close in Arizona, where a proposed marijuana smoke and odor nuisance law died before a final vote. This broadcast uses AI-generated voices to help make the show clearer, more varied, and more dynamic. The reporting, writing, and editorial choices are guided by our news team. The voices help us present the program with more range, pace, and personality. Stay with us for the full details behind each story.
And now here is the deeper look at the key events in the cannabis world this week.
We begin at the federal level. Federal officials have opened their case for moving marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 under the Controlled Substances Act. The central argument is not recreational legalization. The government's position is that marijuana should be regulated differently because federal law must weigh the drug's risks against its accepted medical use. On the first day of the hearing, a DEA attorney described the proceeding as a regulatory matter. An FDA official testified that marijuana's day-to-day harms are generally lower than those associated with alcohol, opioids, and most other comparison substances. The testimony also pointed to cannabis having fewer overdose deaths and a much lower fatal overdose potential than Schedule II opioids. Medical use is a major part of the case. A physician appearing for the government was expected to discuss treating pain patients with marijuana instead of opioids, including patients he had personally transitioned between the two. The outcome could also affect federal taxes for cannabis businesses. Section 280E prevents businesses dealing with Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 substances from deducting ordinary business expenses. That restriction does not apply to Schedule 3 drugs. If marijuana is rescheduled, qualifying state-licensed cannabis companies may eventually gain access to deductions, depending on final federal action and IRS guidance. Opponents are challenging the government's evidence. Reform supporters have also criticized the process, saying they were excluded from participation. The hearing is scheduled to continue through July 15th. But even after that, lawsuits, congressional pressure, and agency rulemaking may still shape the final result.
In Pennsylvania, Senate Democrats are trying to force movement on adult-use marijuana legalization. All 23 Democratic senators have signed a discharge resolution seeking to move Senate Bill 120 out of the Law and Justice Committee. The bill has been sitting there for almost a year. The measure has bipartisan sponsors, Democratic Senator Sharif Street and Republican Senator Dan Laughlin. Laughlin also chairs the committee, but he has not scheduled the bill for consideration. Senate Bill 120 would allow adults 21 and older to possess up to 30 grams of cannabis flower, 1,000 milligrams of THC in edibles, and 5 grams of concentrate. It would also create a process to expunge certain marijuana records. Retail cannabis would face an 8% excise tax in addition to Pennsylvania's regular 6% sales tax. The discharge resolution does not guarantee a vote. Republican leaders control the Senate calendar, and Republicans hold a 27-23 majority. Even if every Democrat and Laughlin support the bill, legalization supporters would still need 2 more Republican votes to reach a majority. The political pressure is growing. A recent poll found that 3 out of 4 Pennsylvania voters support regulated recreational cannabis. The state's independent fiscal office estimates legalization could produce nearly $500 million in annual revenue by 2028. Governor Josh Shapiro supports adult-use legalization. House Democrats have also included expected cannabis revenue in their budget planning. But the House and Senate remain divided over what a legal market should look like. The House previously favored state-owned stores. Senate Republicans criticized that model without passing their own alternative. The discharge resolution may force a conversation. Whether it produces an actual vote remains in the hands of the Senate's Republican majority.
In Idaho, a campaign to put medical marijuana before voters remains uncertain. The Natural Medicine Alliance of Idaho reported collecting more than 150,000 signatures and spent about $2 million on paid petition circulators. But ballot qualification in Idaho requires more than a large statewide total. Organizers need valid signatures from 6% of registered voters statewide and the same percentage in at least 18 of Idaho's 35 legislative districts. The campaign lost about 4,000 signatures from Minidoka County after a contractor arrived shortly after 5 p.m. on the May 1st deadline. A county employee accepted the petitions while warning that they were late. District Judge W. Reed Cotton ruled on June 18th that the documents arrived after the close of business and could not be counted. Other signatures may also be at risk. Idaho requires petition circulators to be adult state residents, and election officials asked the campaign to document the residency of some gatherers after complaints. Secretary of State Phil McGrain said roughly half of initiative signatures are commonly rejected because of voter registration and address problems. He said the medical marijuana proposal had not yet met the legal qualification requirements. The campaign says its raw total gives it confidence, but it has not confirmed that it cleared the threshold in 18 legislative districts. Idaho remains one of the few states where marijuana is entirely illegal. Even if the proposal qualifies, no law changes immediately. Voters would still have to approve medical marijuana in November before the state could begin creating a program.
In Nebraska, permanent regulations for medical cannabis have been approved, but the market is not fully operational. Attorney General Mike Hilgers completed his legal review on June 30th. He concluded that the regulations did not clearly violate the state or federal constitutions on their face, while making clear that his decision was not an endorsement of the policy. Governor Jim Pillen approved the rules on July 1st. They become law 5 days after the Secretary of State receives them. The framework allows 4 cultivators, 4 manufacturers, up to 12 transporters, and no more than 12 dispensaries statewide. Patients will need recommendations from healthcare practitioners listed in a state directory. Purchases from the same dispensary are limited to 5 ounces in 30 days, including no more than 5 grams of Delta-9 THC. The allowed product range is narrow. Smoking products, cannabis vapes, and conventional edibles are prohibited. Oral tablets with limited flavoring may be sold. 4 cultivators have received licenses, but only 1 had passed inspection and been cleared to begin growing. Other operators have faced delayed inspections or local zoning problems. Manufacturer applications have also opened. Advocates say the dispensary cap, product restrictions, and practitioner directory requirement could make the program difficult for patients to use. A separate legal issue remains before the Nebraska Supreme Court. The court is considering claims that the regulatory measure lacked enough valid petition signatures to appear on the 2024 ballot. If the court invalidates that law, the Commission's authority and its regulations could also be affected. For now, the rules are moving forward. A functioning market will still depend on practitioners, production, licensing, and dispensary openings.
In Delaware, lawmakers have overridden Governor Matt Meyer's veto of a cannabis zoning bill. The House voted 25-16 on July 1st to approve the override. The Senate had taken the same step in January. Senate Bill 75 is now law. The measure limits how counties may use zoning rules to restrict licensed marijuana businesses. Counties may not completely ban marijuana cultivation facilities in agricultural or industrial areas. They also must permit retail marijuana stores in commercial or industrial zones. Local governments still retain authority. Marijuana businesses may be required to remain at least 500 feet from schools, childcare centers, residential treatment facilities, parks, and libraries. Counties may also impose civil penalties for violations, as long as their rules do not conflict with state law. Supporters said Delaware had issued cannabis licenses without ensuring that businesses could find commercially realistic places to operate. Some conditional license holders still have not opened, even though the adult use market began sales in August 2025. Meyer, who supports legalization, defended his veto as a matter of local control. He argued that counties and communities should have a voice in where marijuana stores operate. The new law does not change possession limits, medical marijuana eligibility, or public consumption rules. Its effect is more likely to show up in the business market. Retailers and cultivators may have more locations to consider, but new openings are not automatic. Businesses still need property, financing, permits, inspections, and final regulatory approval. The law removes one land use obstacle while leaving much of Delaware's developing cannabis market unchanged.
In Missouri, regulators are preparing to accept applications for 77 marijuana micro-business licenses. Applications will be open from July 13th through July 27th. The Missouri Lottery is scheduled to select applicants on September 9th. Regulators expect to issue licenses in December after reviewing eligibility and ownership information. The licenses will authorize either dispensaries or cultivation facilities. They are part of the micro-business program created by the constitutional amendment voters approved in 2022 to legalize recreational marijuana. Applicants may qualify through one of 7 categories tied to income, residence in an impoverished area, or past marijuana-related arrests and incarceration. The application fee is $1,500 and will be refunded to applicants who are not selected. The state says the application form is relatively straightforward and has released tutorials and a step-by-step guide. But officials are also warning that a simple application does not make the business itself simple. Cannabis facilities are expensive to develop and operate. They also face detailed security and compliance rules. New regulations that took effect at the end of May tightened ownership requirements. Eligible participants must hold more than half of the business and more than half of its decision-making power. The changes follow earlier license revocations involving agreements that left some eligible applicants with limited control or limited profits. Applicants must now complete a 3-video training course covering compliance and potential predatory practices. Regulators will also communicate directly with the eligible majority owners. For consumers, the application round creates no immediate change. Its impact will depend on how many selected businesses complete review, secure financing, and eventually open.
In Rhode Island, the state is trying to restart cannabis retail licensing after months of delay. The Cannabis Control Commission has asked a federal judge to dissolve an injunction that blocked application reviews and a planned license lottery. The dispute began with a rule requiring adult-use cannabis retailers to be majority-owned by Rhode Island residents. 3 lawsuits challenged that restriction, and U.S. District Judge Melissa Dubose halted the process on April 8th. Lawmakers have now removed the requirement. Governor Dan McKee signed 2 bills on June 10th, allowing applicants from outside Rhode Island to compete. The changes also revise eligibility for 6 social equity licenses. Businesses must remain majority-owned by people disproportionately affected by earlier cannabis enforcement, but the criteria no longer require Rhode Island-specific connections. The state argues that the court order is no longer necessary, but the judge has not yet dissolved it, and the underlying lawsuits have not been reported as resolved. The original licensing round has also been voided. Roughly 100 applicants may receive refunds for fees paid to the commission, including the $7,500 application fee. They will not be reimbursed for rent, property deposits, or other business expenses. The Commission must open a replacement process within 60 days of the June 10th legislation, putting the deadline on August 10th. For consumers, nothing changes immediately. Existing stores can continue operating. Additional retail access depends on the court ruling, the new application process, and the time successful applicants need to open.
In New York, the state's first legal cannabis growers showcase took place at Lincoln Hill Farms in Gorham. The event brought together 12 local farmers and allowed attendees to purchase licensed and tested cannabis products through a regulated adult-use dispensary partner. Under state rules, each showcase must include at least 3 licensed cultivators working with a licensed dispensary. The host municipality must allow retail cannabis sales and approve the event, and the audience must be predominantly adult. State regulators approved cannabis showcases and event sales in 2023. Governor Kathy Hochul later approved a law permitting the events in March 2025. The framework also allows qualifying sales at concerts, festivals, and other public gatherings. For smaller cannabis companies, the format provides something a dispensary shelf may not: direct contact with customers. Bryce Serp, owner of Circle Hill Rosin, said face-to-face contact was significant for his company. Lincoln Hill Farms owner Brian Mastro-Simone said organizers were excited to host the first event and keep the activity local. But the program will not appear everywhere. Municipalities retain authority to approve or reject showcases. That became clear when the Canandaigua Town Board voted against allowing cannabis showcase events. New York has created another route for legal cannabis sales, but the market may develop as a local patchwork. Some communities may host farmers, retailers, and consumers at public events. Others may decide the showcases do not fit their local plans.
Back in Delaware, lawmakers have also approved a statewide system for THC-infused beverages. House Bill 373 was sent to Governor Matt Meyer after the Senate passed the measure 18-3 on July 1st. The House then agreed to the amended version by a vote of 38-2. The proposal covers non-alcoholic beverages made with qualifying Delta-9 extract. A single-serving drink could contain no more than 10 milligrams. Multi-packs would be capped at 60 milligrams, and a 750 milliliter bottle could contain up to 170 milligrams. Sales would be limited to authorized package stores and retail marijuana stores, with some microbreweries also eligible under additional requirements. Package stores would have to keep the beverages separate from alcohol, mixers, marijuana, and marijuana products. Clear signs would identify the drinks as containing THC. The bill also creates a controlled distribution system. Manufacturers would generally send products through licensed Delaware importers, with warehouse storage, testing, notice, and record-keeping required before retail distribution. Third-party and mail delivery would be prohibited. Package stores could still accept electronic orders for in-store or curbside pickup. The proposal sets a tax of 50 cents per single-serving container and $8.50 per 750 milliliter bottle, beginning February 1, 2027. Revenue would go to the Marijuana Regulation Fund. Repeat sales to people younger than 21 could bring fines of as much as $10,000. The final version protects lawful hemp products that are not infused beverages. That means the measure draws a line between regulated THC drinks and other compliant CBD or cannabinoid goods. Most provisions would take effect 90 days after enactment. For now, the measure is awaiting action by the governor.
In Hawaii, the state has begun enforcing new hemp and CBD retail rules. The rules took effect after businesses were given 6 months to register and review their inventories. About 50 stores had registered when inspections began. The state attorney general is also moving against sellers operating without registration. Compliant hemp edibles, beverages, and topicals may remain on sale, but they cannot contain more than 1 milligram of total THC per serving or 5 milligrams per package. Products must also meet laboratory testing, ingredient, labeling, and child safety packaging requirements. Smokable hemp and vaping products are prohibited. So are products containing artificially derived or synthetic cannabinoids, including substances created by converting CBD into another intoxicating cannabinoid. Several retailers are challenging the restrictions in federal court. One plaintiff, Lance Alias, owns 4 hemp and CBD stores and says enforcement could remove almost 90% of his inventory. Retailers argue that the law conflicts with federal hemp protections and exposes them to excessive penalties, including product seizure. State officials say businesses had enough time to comply. Medical Cannabis Control Director Andrew Goff said many disputed items were intended to be intoxicating and that smokable hemp and vapes were never legal in Hawaii. For retailers, the new rules are immediate and significant. For consumers, the hemp products available on store shelves may become far more limited.
In North Carolina, lawmakers are moving toward a major restriction on intoxicating hemp products, but the proposal is not yet law. The Senate voted 37-6 on July 2nd to approve the conference report for House Bill 328. The House had already adjourned, so representatives must still approve the compromise before it can reach Governor Josh Stein. The bill would restrict hemp-derived consumables and kratom to adults 21 and older. A second change could reshape the state's hemp market. Beginning November 12th, lawful hemp would be measured by total THC rather than Delta-9 THC alone. That calculation would include THCA, Delta-8, Delta-10, and other forms of THC. Finished consumable products could contain no more than 0.4 milligrams per retail container. Synthetic or chemically converted cannabinoids would be prohibited. That threshold could remove most intoxicating gummies, drinks, vapes, and THCA flower from store shelves. Supporters say the current market includes products with unclear potency, candy-like packaging, and limited enforcement. They also point to sales near schools and inconsistent age verification. Critics say demand will continue and may shift to unlicensed sellers. Some hemp companies warn that the limit would eliminate most of their product lines. The final compromise is narrower than earlier drafts. It does not establish a broad licensing, testing, and labeling system. Instead, it relies on age restrictions, controlled substance rules, and civil penalties that can reach tens of thousands of dollars. The bill would also ban synthetic kratom, restrict natural kratom to adults, and add xylazine to Schedule 3. The House is expected to reconsider the proposal during the week of July 27th.
In South Carolina, lawmakers ended a special session without agreement on how to regulate hemp-derived THC drinks and edibles. A 6-member conference committee had unanimously backed the Senate's version of a compromise bill. The Senate then approved it by an overwhelming margin, but the House rejected it later Thursday. The proposal would have required buyers to be at least 21. It also would have restricted sales largely to liquor stores, capped THC potency, banned synthetic THC, and required laboratory testing and labels. Provisions dealing with impaired driving were removed and could be considered separately. The hemp industry strongly opposed the compromise. Businesses argued that limiting sales to liquor stores would remove products from thousands of existing retailers and could force small companies to close. An industry association leader estimated South Carolina's hemp market at between $600 million and $700 million, though that estimate was not independently verified in the reports discussed during the debate. Law enforcement took the opposite position. South Carolina Law Enforcement Division Chief Mark Keel supported the bill and said statewide enforcement is virtually impossible without clearer rules. For consumers, the failed proposal means South Carolina still has no newly enacted statewide age limit, potency cap, or uniform testing and labeling requirements for these products. The situation may change again in November when federal restrictions on hemp THC products are scheduled to begin unless Congress adopts a new regulatory approach or delays them. For now, the state debate has stopped, but uncertainty remains for consumers, businesses, and law enforcement.
We close in Arizona, where a proposal targeting marijuana smoke and odor has died. Senate Bill 1725, sponsored by Republican Senator J.D. Mesnard, passed the Senate in March and later cleared the House Judiciary Committee, but an objection kept it from passing on the House consent calendar, and lawmakers adjourned on June 13th before considering it through the regular process. The bill would have defined excessive marijuana smoke or odor as emissions detectable on another private property for more than 30 consecutive minutes, or on at least 3 days within a 30-day period. Supporters said the measure would protect residents whose homes and property were repeatedly affected by cannabis smoke. Opponents, including Arizona NORML and the ACLU of Arizona, argued that it could weaken the legalization framework approved by voters in 2020 and create subjective enforcement. The proposal changed during debate. Earlier language included broader criminal penalties. Later revisions focused more closely on people who refused to comply with a court or local order to stop a nuisance. Each day of continued non-compliance could have counted as a separate petty offense. Legal marijuana use would not have automatically prevented a nuisance finding. A medical marijuana registry card could have been considered by a court as a mitigating factor, but it would not have provided complete immunity. With the bill dead, patients, adult-use consumers, property owners, and cannabis businesses remain under existing state laws, local ordinances, lease terms, and private property rules. The statewide proposal is finished for 2026, though disputes over cannabis smoke and neighborhood property rights may continue at the local level.
That's this week's Cannabis Policy Briefing. The biggest story remains federal rescheduling, but the state-level picture is just as important. Pennsylvania is testing the political path to adult-use legalization. Idaho and Nebraska show the uneven pace of medical cannabis access. Delaware, Missouri, Rhode Island, and New York are working through the mechanics of a legal market. And hemp-derived THC remains one of the most contested issues in state legislatures. We release a new episode every Saturday at 9 a.m. If you're new to the show, subscribe on your favorite platform. If you're already subscribed, hit the like button, leave a rating or comment, and share the episode with anyone following cannabis policy in the United States.